Tell me if this sounds familiar. You decided to watch this movie that everyone always says is really great, but as you watched, you realized that the story is not the easiest to follow. There are a lot of confusing details and questions in the story, mysterious things that don't really get explained. You continue on, hoping to find answers to these questions, but if anything, the story only gets more mysterious, with each answer only raising new questions. And the mysteries keep piling up until your brain starts to hurt keeping track of it all, and you get to the end and you're like, help, I need someone to explain this to me. Fortunately, that's why I'm here. Memento is what I like to call a mystery box story, definition on screen, and I've dedicated myself to explaining as many of them as possible. If you have unanswered questions about the convoluted lore of a story you've just finished, then I'm the guy who can give you those answers. Then afterwards, I give each mystery box story a rating out of 10, using my 10 criteria for what makes mysteries like these fun and engaging. In this video, I'm going to give you a comprehensive explanation of every single mystery and question you could possibly have about this story. So, let's get out our copious amounts of notes, although hopefully they're on paper and not on our bodies, and explain Memento. Memento is Christopher Nolan's first big blockbuster. It was based on a short story written by his brother, Jonathan Nolan, who you might remember is also the co-creator of Westworld. Between that and Christopher Nolan's reputation for complicated stories, that's a great recipe for some mind-bending mysteries. The movie is about a guy named Leonard who has Anterograde amnesia. He can't form new memories, and in any given scene, he's always playing catch-up trying to figure out what's going on. To create that same feeling in the audience, the movie tells its story backwards, so the audience also has to puzzle out what led up to each scene. The whole story is a mess of puzzling details that have you scratching your head and trying to sort through everything you've seen. And unless you're laser focused the whole way through, it's easy to lose track of the plot. And that's what this video is for. I'll break down everything that happens and then explain how it all fits together. My thumb hurts. The movie begins with Leonard shooting a guy named Teddy. Then the movie jumps back in time to a scene of Leonard and Teddy hanging out, until Leonard finds a note for himself telling himself to kill Teddy. Leonard explains his condition, how he can't remember anything since his tragic accident, when an unknown attacker named John G broke into his house, killed his wife, and hit him on the head. Leonard has been trying to hunt down the guy who did this for a long time, which isn't easy because he can't remember anything. He uses a series of notes and tattoos to keep track of everything he's learned about the guy. When he finds out that Teddy's real name is John Gamble, John G, he writes down that note telling himself that Teddy is the one, kill him. In between the main plot, there are these black and white scenes where Leonard talks about a guy named Sammy Jankis, who had the same condition that he had back in the day. Leonard hangs out with this woman named Natalie, and he gets into a conflict with a man named Dodd, who had been threatening her. They have a few confrontations that end in Leonard kidnapping Dodd and then letting him go. People keep telling Leonard how he can easily be manipulated, and that's never more clear than in this scene, when Teddy tells him to write down that he shouldn't trust Natalie, which leaves him with contradictory notes. The black and white scenes always show Leonard talking on the phone, until he looks down and notices a tattoo telling him he should never answer the phone. Dodd is after Natalie because her boyfriend Jimmy was a drug dealer who owed Dodd money, and who disappeared after meeting with Teddy. It also becomes clear that Natalie manipulated Leonard into getting rid of Dodd to get herself out of danger. In the story of Sammy Jankis, Sammy's wife died because she didn't believe Sammy's condition was real, so she kept asking him to give her diabetes shot over and over until it killed her. In the black and white and color scenes, there's this cop who keeps trying to get in touch with him. Teddy is that cop, and he's undercover trying to bust this drug ring. With direction from Teddy, Leonard murders Jimmy, thinking he's John G. This is the last black and white scene, and the movie switches into color as it ends. Leonard suspects that something was wrong, and he confronts Teddy. Teddy admits that he arranged for Leonard to kill Jimmy so they could split his drug money. Teddy also reveals that Leonard's wife didn't die. All the stuff that we heard about Sammy Jankis and his wife actually happened with Leonard and his wife. Also, Leonard already found and killed the guy he was looking for, and just never remembered. So Teddy started using him to kill other people named John G. The movie ends with Leonard burning the picture he took of Jimmy's body to forget he ever caught his guy, and then leaves himself clues that will point his future self in the direction of believing that Teddy, John Gamble, was the killer, which we know from the first scene is exactly what happens. Didn't I say all this already? This is the kind of movie where you need to watch it twice before you really understand it. But if you take the time to keep track of all the pieces, understanding the plot is very doable. First things first, let's figure out the chronological order of everything we see. Like a lot of this movie, the timeline isn't as complicated as it might seem at first. Real simply, all the scenes that are in color take place in reverse order. Any scenes that are in black and white take place earlier in the timeline, in a regular order. Eventually, at the end of the movie, the last black and white scene transitions into the first color scene of the timeline. This is hard to convey with words, so here's a clip of Christopher Nolan himself drawing a timeline.
That's basically the end of the movie. This stuff is the black and white stuff. This is color, running backwards as a series of jumps. And what we do is we cut between the two the whole way through, and they meet towards the end of the film.
Now, before I get to explaining anything else, I have to make a couple of things very clear. First, for the whole movie, we're told that Leonard can't remember anything after his accident, but he can remember everything before the accident just fine. That is not true. The end of the movie reveals that a lot of things Leonard remembered about his life before were straight up wrong. So we can't rely on that assumption that anything before the accident happened the way Leonard said. Second, we will never know all the details about everything that happened to Leonard. We can basically trust that anything we see happen on screen really happened, but everything else we know about events of the past is told to Leonard by other characters who we know have lied to him repeatedly. When I talk about anything that happened before the movie started, know that this information is coming from an unreliable source, the only one we have. Okay, now let's start breaking things down. Let's start with the biggest mystery. Who is John G? The whole movie, Leonard is looking for John G, the man who attacked him and his wife. But by the end, we learn almost nothing about him. John G appears to have just been some random criminal who broke into Leonard's house.
So who was he?
Just some guy. I mean, does it even matter who? No reason, Lenny. No conspiracy, just bad luck.
We never see the real John G in the movie. The big twist of the story is that Teddy helped Leonard find and kill John G a long time ago. Since then, Teddy's been manipulating Leonard into killing other criminals named John G so that Teddy can loot their bodies, basically.
The real John G. I helped you find him over a year ago. He's already dead. We found him, you killed him. So I helped you. Start looking again. Looking for the guy you already killed. Cheer up. There's plenty of John G's for us to find.
Now, like I said, Teddy could be lying, but we see a photo of Leonard posing after John G's death, so it seems true. It's not out of the realm of possibility that this was just another one of Teddy's criminals, and that the real John G is still out there. But there's no direct evidence to suggest that, and Teddy only admits this when threatened, so I'm going to treat Teddy's confession as the truth. Let's talk about Leonard's fallible memory. I already said that he believes memories from before the accident are accurate, but they aren't. But which ones aren't accurate? First, the fact that his wife died. His wife actually survived. She died sometime after the attack, and it was Leonard's fault. Speaking of which, second, Leonard forgot that his wife had diabetes. And third, the story of Sammy Jankis didn't happen to Sammy Jankis. It happened to Leonard. Leonard really was an insurance investigator, and he really did investigate a claim involving Sammy having amnesia. But everything else that Leonard says happened to Sammy happened to him. Leonard's wife became convinced that she could snap Leonard out of his amnesia if she pushed him far enough. Leonard's wife had diabetes, and Leonard's wife asked Leonard to give her multiple insulin shots, hoping that Leonard would notice the issue and stop, leading to her dying of an overdose. The reason Leonard misremembered all this is because A, his brain damage was more severe than he realized, and B, he repressed a lot of those memories because of how traumatizing they would be for him if he did remember. Again, all this stuff is coming from Teddy, and it's totally possible that he lied about some of this stuff. But I'm choosing to take him at his word. He had no reason to lie because Leonard would just forget the conversation either way. So if Teddy was guiding Leonard to kill people named John G, then how did Leonard end up thinking Teddy was John G? Well, in that scene, when Teddy confessed to manipulating Leonard, Leonard decided to get revenge. Before he forgot everything Teddy told him, he burned the pictures of the dead Jimmy and the dead original John G, and left himself clues that would lead his future self to believe Teddy was John G. Leaving himself false clues is something we see him do on occasion throughout the movie, and this is the big payoff to that. Leonard keeps saying over and over that his notes are reliable, but we're shown that they aren't. How does Natalie fit into all this? Well, she and her boyfriend Jimmy Grantz were drug dealers, until Teddy convinced Leonard that Jimmy was John G, so that Leonard would murder him and Teddy could steal his drug money. When Jimmy went missing, this caused his boss, Dodd, to assume Natalie had stolen the money, and he started threatening her. When Natalie met Leonard, she seduced him and got him to chase Dodd out of town for her. She knew that Leonard killed Jimmy, or at least she was pretty sure. For most of the movie, Leonard was walking around wearing Jimmy's clothes. That's why Teddy didn't want Leonard hanging around her. He was afraid that she would catch on to Teddy's scheme. Who was on the phone? It's unconfirmed, but it was almost definitely Teddy. We can also safely assume that the reason why Leonard left himself a message saying don't answer the phone is because he started to figure out at some point that Teddy was untrustworthy, but he didn't give himself enough specifics as to why. Right before Leonard kills Jimmy, Jimmy whispers Sammy.
He said Sammy. How does he know about Sammy?
This event is what kicks off the big final scene where Teddy explains everything. Jimmy sold drugs out of the discount inn. When Teddy decided to target him, he sent Leonard to go stay there. At some point, Leonard and Jimmy ran into each other, and Leonard told the story about Sammy Jankis, like he does with pretty much everybody.
You tell everybody about Sammy. Everybody will listen. Remember Sammy Jankis? Remember Sammy Jankis? Great story, gets better every time you tell it.
Okay, with all the big questions answered, I'll list everything that happens in chronological order. We begin before the start of the movie, with events we only see as flashbacks. Leonard Shelby is an insurance investigator. On one of his cases, he investigates a man named Sammy Jankis, who has Anterograde amnesia. After getting to know him, Leonard determines that the amnesia is psychological, not physical, and denies him coverage. Sammy's amnesia is real though, just not a direct result of brain damage. Sometime later, two criminals decide to break into Leonard's and his wife's home. They sexually assault Leonard's wife. Leonard kills one of them, but the other one hits him on the head and escapes. The blow to the head gives Leonard Anterograde amnesia. Leonard's wife recovers from the attack and is unable to accept Leonard's condition. She asks him to give her a bunch of insulin shots in a row, hoping he would realize something was wrong and stop, but instead he ends up killing her. The police assume that only one guy broke in, the guy Leonard killed, and decide to close the case, which leaves the second guy out there somewhere. But one of the cops, Officer John Gamble, takes pity on Leonard and helps him carry out some vigilante justice. At some point, they figure out the guy's name is John G, but we never learn how. Eventually, Gamble and Leonard find and kill John G. But then Leonard immediately forgets. So, Gamble decides to go on the hunt for other criminals named John G for Leonard to chase. He figured that he could give Leonard purpose in life, clean the streets of some bad people, and steal some dirty money from the dead criminals. It's a win-win-win. Even though Leonard might have objected if he could, he also wanted to have somebody to chase. At some point around this time, Leonard ripped out 12 pages of the police report of his case to make John G harder to identify, so that many more people would fit the profile of what he knew. So, they set out to kill an untold number of John Gs, with Gamble using the undercover name of Teddy. This eventually leads Teddy to the drug dealer Jimmy Grantz. Leonard checks into the discount inn where Jimmy likes to hang out to do some investigating. At some point, Leonard and Jimmy meet, Leonard tells the story of Sammy, and then Leonard forgets. This is when the black and white scenes begin. Leonard hangs out in the motel, talks to Teddy on the phone about Sammy for the 100th time, and puts together the false clues planted by Teddy that say Jimmy is John G. Teddy sets up a drug deal with Jimmy, so Jimmy goes to a remote location with a big bag of cash, only to find Leonard, who murders him. But Jimmy whispers Sammy, which prompts Teddy to confess to all the ways he's been manipulating Leonard. Leonard is so angry that Teddy would use him like that he decides to leave himself clues that point to Teddy, John Gamble, as John G. Then, for the majority of the movie, Leonard chases the false trail he laid for himself. On the way, he interacts with Natalie, Jimmy's girlfriend, who gets him to protect her from Jimmy's angry boss, Dodd. But eventually, Leonard figures out that Teddy is John G, and kills him. The cycle will never end. Leonard will keep finding John G's and killing them, because he needs to believe that his wife's killer is out there to give his life meaning. Even when there is no lead to chase, he'll make one up for his future self, so that he's always trying to solve this mystery for the rest of his life. This movie makes my head hurt. But then again, my head hurts a lot these days. Where's the beginning? Where's the end? How can you trust your own memories? Those are some hard-hitting questions about life that I don't have answers for. It's one of the earliest examples of a mystery box story. It came out in 2000, before Lost, and Christopher Nolan is not following the same playbook as all the other ones I've talked about. So, how satisfying is it to untangle the central mysteries of this movie? After we meet Leonard and learn about his condition, we're told the main question behind the story. Who is John G? Who killed Leonard's wife? Then, because the story is told out of order, every scene becomes mysterious in its own way. We're always asking ourselves, how did Leonard get here? Who are these people, and what do they want?
Okay, so what am I doing? Oh, I'm chasing this guy. No, he's he's chasing me.
But everything all ties back to the search for John G in one way or another. The presentation of the story clearly encourages the audience to try and solve this mystery alongside Leonard, to try and make sense of what we're seeing despite not knowing what came before. It's a single movie, so it's not very long. It's nowhere near as expansive and complicated as a TV show tends to be. The mysteries are constantly present through the whole story. Your brain will be running at full speed trying to piece together all the scenes from the first minute to the last minute, and the movie saves all the juiciest reveals for right at the end. Here's where things get interesting. The piece of information that throws everything for a loop is the fact that Leonard's memories before the accident are fallible, which means that some of the flashbacks we see never actually happened. Sure, with some digging, you can sort through what's real and what's not, but knowing that some stuff isn't real could easily cause someone to feel like the mysteries aren't solvable because we can't trust any information we have. Which is a good thing. It's what makes the experience of watching this movie so unique, but it makes the story a less effective mystery box. The ending nails the balance of how much to reveal. Teddy's confession answers every immediate question we had about the story, but at the same time, it opens so many new questions about what we thought we knew already. It encourages the audience to watch it again with pen and paper to parse out all the information and lies. You can go through every detail and solve every story-relevant mystery, but also there are still dozens of tiny things we'll never know that aren't directly relevant to the story. Obviously, Christopher Nolan planned all this in advance. This is the most sure we can be of any mystery box story I've ever talked about. Movies are made out of order, all at once, so of course it'd have to be planned out beforehand. And the source material has the same twist at the end. Finally, the characters do have an emotional connection to the mysteries. Leonard's entire mission in life is solving these mysteries, even if in between that he takes steps to make solving them harder for himself. You know, maybe Memento is pretty complicated for the average movie, but for the average mystery box story, it's pretty simple. It was honestly a nice relaxing break to work on this video. This was way easier than the Manifest video. Wait, I made that video already, right? This movie is a pioneer. Ow. Jam my thumb. Jeez, that hurts. This movie is a pioneer in so many ways. It was Nolan's first big hit, getting audiences used to his mind-bending, high-concept plots. Its one-of-a-kind premise forced audiences to dial in and really pay attention to understand what they were watching. And it's one of the earliest mystery box stories, proving that there was an appetite for fiction that asked people to untangle an overwhelming web of unanswered questions. It's often ranked as one of the best movies in recent history, and I totally get why. Memento gets a final mystery box rating of 8 out of 10.
And why would my memory reset? It's just like the film. Finding Dory. Huh? Finding Dory. Say no more. I completely understand.